Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of empowerED podcast. And this is season number 6. And we are discussing the idea of how education moves forward at this time of the pandemic and even hopefully after the pandemic. Our theme mainly is on the one word rebuild. So we are looking into how we continue to rebuild teaching and learning, school communities at this time around. And we have been talking to different guests, experts in the different fields that we want to touch on. And for this episode, we want to look into EdTech. We've been talking about EdTech even before the different seasons of empowerED podcast. But this time around, I have a very special guest who will be sharing her expertise at the same time her experience in guiding and leading a school community in terms of facing the challenges of online distance learning or online learning. To introduce our guest, she's a friend of mine. I've met her way back in, I don't know, 2014, I think, or 2013, as early as that. She's been one of the leading edtech pioneers in the Philippines. She is Trish Castro. You might have heard if you heard her, especially this time around. She's been also doing some workshops and webinars online with other institutions or organizations as she continues to help teachers, not just in her school, but even in the Philippines, in using technology tools for online distance learning. So she is currently the EdTech coordinator of the LaSalle University Integrated School in Laguna. She is an Apple Distinguished Educator, an Apple trainer. But I've known her as an English teacher who was so enthusiastic in using technology tools, iPads in her classroom. So let's welcome Trish Castro. Hi, Trish.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for inviting me for this podcast.
It's an honor. It's our honor and a pleasure that you join us. So, before we go to our serious question, for our not so serious discussion, I'm just gonna ask how you are right now and how you've been, doing your work in your school also.
Hi, I'm doing good. Thanks for asking, Jim. I think I've already adjusted somewhat to the workload and the concerns that I get from parents, from students, from other stakeholders are much less because I think that they have already started to adjust into the tech tools that are required for online distance learning. So the things that I just respond to now are more of questions like what tools can I use to be able to deliver this lesson and whatnot, and other requests. And basically that's it.
Yeah. Full disclosure for everyone. This is not the first time that Trish and I are discussing about EdTech. Well, we have iMessage chat group where we exchange ideas. We also try to ask each other about the challenges. Trish and I are both EdTech coordinators, and we've come a long way. We've started from in the classroom, but right now it's been really challenging. And even before we started the interview, we've been sharing about the challenges of being an EdTech coordinator. And yeah, the first question that I have for Trish is actually a general reflection. We have EdTech even before the pandemic. So EdTech has been pushed forward, right? It's under the spotlight right now. So EdTech and the pandemic, what has been like the story behind it right now?
Well, EdTech really became the solution to narrowing that transactional distance between the teachers and the students. Without our early adopter schools in EdTech, like, Xavier School, De La Salle Sobel, De La Salle University Integrated School, and the like, I don't know where our online distance learning programs would be like this year because this is the only solution for the lockdown, right? And if we think, I know Jim and I would already be talking about this, that despite how good looking our programs are on paper, Of course, it will still be chaotic, and it was chaotic in the first few months and weeks of the program. But imagine if there weren't people who are not knowledgeable about EdTech in this time. I think it would be more chaotic. It could be another disaster right in front of us. So actually, I would like to take this moment to thank our visionary leaders who really took on and embraced the EdTech idea and bring it here into the country. So I'd like to mention Father Johnny, of course, for Savior School, Brother Bernie Oka for Del Salsabel, Brother Dennis Magbanwa, and of course my principal then, who started it in De La Salle University, the De La Salle University Integrated School, Sir Rafi Reloza. So these are the people who really embraced EdTech, and I owe much of our career, Jim, no, as EdTech directors to these people, because if they did not bring it here, we probably wouldn't know anything about EdTech. We'll just be using technology in our own little way, but never really realized how we can maximize and the power really of using technology in teaching and learning. So much thanks to them. And I don't think any school will still to the revert to the traditional learning after this year, because after the teachers have tasted already what technology can do or bring into the learning process, into the teaching process, I don't think they want to let go of that anymore when we start, even if we return to the face-to-face classes. So I think EdTech is here to stay, and the EdTech program will be pushed even forward after this pandemic. And I think there is a rumor that even up to first quarter of next year, it will still be the same setup. And I'm sure schools are already planning also towards that direction. Actually, in our school, the De La Salle University Integrated School, we're already thinking of really putting in a blended learning program even post pandemic. So this is what EdTech and the pandemic has done to the educational world, at least in our school and in the country.
Cheers. I love that you mentioned about it's a reality that there are schools who have been more ahead. They've been ahead in terms of adopting edtech, and for sure these schools, our schools, it made it a little bit easier for us to transition. And I love that you mentioned that behind the idea of edtech adoption are visionary leaders. I think, and I would very much agree. I agree with you that the pandemic has really pushed everyone to become visionary leaders. Also, it has, it has arrived into shoving everyone. It's not just pushing anymore. It's really shoving everyone to the idea of online tools. And whether school leaders would love to refer themselves as visionary leaders at this point around, everyone was pushed to become at least a little bit visionary, whether you're a school leader or a teacher. But I
Agreed.
love that you mentioned that edtech is here to stay. I think that's one recognition that we had. The rate of how we adopt edtech will be very, very different. But I love that you mentioned that teachers have already tasted, what it meant to teach with edtech tools, and we don't want to waste the professional development that we
Yeah.
have been giving or sharing to a lot of teachers, not just in school but other schools also. We have that experience, and we hope to learn from that experience. Yeah. Speaking of learning, Trish, and it's okay. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts, even your experience in guiding teachers outside your school community. What has been the new learnings? We have our own learnings even before the pandemic, but we're very interested into looking into the new learnings at the same time, challenges that really came out about edtech at the time of the pandemic.
Right. And I think I'd start with the challenges because we all learn from our mistakes, right? And those mistakes are basically our challenges. So let me start with the challenges, of course, our first problem really is equitable access to technology. The most ideal situation to implement an effective online distance learning in a pandemic is really through the use of technology. Yes, we can get by with printed modules. For example, the EdTech has two modes of learning, right? The modular and the online distance learning. But learning is not just the interaction of the student with text. Learning is also about student-student interaction and student-teacher interaction. So these last two interactions are neglected by the modular learning. But then again, at least we can say that there is equitable access to education. But with regard to equitable access to quality education in a time of pandemic, that remains to still be improved and addressed. Of course, with regard to our public school students who cannot afford technology at this time, the government really has to step in. So that's really a challenge for all schools. And in terms of the challenge in my school, looking at just what we have faced, is really the equitable access to technological skills.
Yeah.
Because what we realized was that our parents and students, especially the grade school, because our grade school does not use technology pre-pandemic. It's only our junior high school students and senior high school. So that was very difficult for us to deal with the grade school students because they don't have any experience in using technology in the context of education, submitting work, creating content, etc. Especially also with the parents, we overlook the fact that our parents are also our remote learning aides. So that's one thing that we overlooked in our program, but we were able to address after engaging in a dialogue with the parents. And in our dialogue, we realized that parents are the parents' technological skills also vary. Some are very adept with using Google Calendar and fixing all their children's work, but for some, it's their first time to use Google Calendar, or it's not everyone also is capable of uploading videos and photos in Seesaw, something like that. The only thing that they know is uploading pictures and videos in Facebook. But the process is different when it's already a learning management system or a portfolio or journal app like Seesaw. So everyone was really trying to get to know each other. And in terms of our school, and we needed to exercise more empathy. And this is one thing that we all learned during the pandemic, this big word, empathy. Empathy will not, the online distance learning will not be effective or will not work without empathy. The emphasis for empathy in online distance learning cannot be undermined because we have to constantly put ourselves in the shoes of our students. How's my student? How is their mental health? How is their anxiety levels? Because these things are real. And some boomers, they call them boomers, but it's derogatory to be honest, but they some adults would always dismiss their teenagers or children's anxiety that nag-iinarte lang yan in Tagalog, right? But
Yeah.
it's not pag-iinarte, it's real. Anxiety is real, and we adults also experience anxiety. So we cannot dismiss that. So the compassion, that empathy is really highlighted in online distance learning. If there's anything that I really learned personally, that would be it. It's empathy, exercising empathy, and always being understanding with regard to student submissions and quality of work as well, right? And if a student, for example, fails to attend a synchronous session, you don't judge that student and then call that student lazy or natutulog lang, right? We want to your first reaction now is to approach the student. Hey, how are you? Why weren't you there in the synchronous session? Is there anything I can help you with? How's your connection? Maybe your connection was not stable, or maybe you slept late because of something, a personal problem or something like that. So this is the human connection really is also emphasized in the online distance learning. And definitely, one other learning our parents would probably have learned also is changing routines, because the pandemic and online distance learning really changed and disrupted their comfort zone. It, if not disrupted, it totally obliterated their comfort zone. And they have to create this new learning zone. And hopefully, once they start adjusting into that new learning zone, this new learning zone becomes their new comfort zone. So I think they are already there in that comfort zone because I am receiving less emails.
Trish, brilliant answer and brilliant sharing. I really love the very specific things that you've mentioned about, you know, the learning. At the same time, you even offered us like, what have you done? What have you done with the challenges to overcome them? On my mind, I'm categorizing them into three. I think the first one was really about, you know, equity, quality education, more of the logistical part of it. Like, if we want to do EdTech, we need to make sure that no one gets left behind. I mean, you know, UNESCO, for example, the UN have been mentioning about, you know, SDG number 4, quality education, and technology should bridge, but we know in reality that instead of bridging, you know, it bridges in some countries the idea of education gap, but for some countries like in the Philippines, it sort of widens the gap. So I love that you mentioned about, you know, equity in terms of access, in terms of skills preparation. And you know, Trish and I have been observing this, our, you know, our small Apple distinguished educators community in the Philippines, and even the EdTech community. We've learned, through our own experience on the first week of classes, online classes, that, you know, we prepared our teachers. We thought of, we also want to think that we prepared the parents, but when the whole experience kicked in, you know, parents needed to adjust, teachers needed to adjust, students needed to adjust. And that's when we got the big picture of the different skill levels. And I think um, schools like the schools of Trish, my school, for example, had to do like, you know, agile, had to plan in a very agile way how to answer the solution. But one thing that I have ticked in the learning part of the list is actually to recognize the different levels of skills. And Trish has mentioned about preparing for next school year. We're doing that also, and you know, it's doing our head in. It's really crazy right now, and that's one thing that is on top of the list to consider. And Trish, I think I want to pick up your sharing on this. I love that you went beyond the academic side of online learning. We often equate online learning with the academic side of it. Like, you know, we're trying to get the pedagogical part perfect, the assessment part. But I love that you mentioned about empathy, the idea of flexibility, the idea of being more patient and compassionate at this time around. I think that's one way of looking into the holistic side of online distance learning. So thank you for reminding us about that. And we need to have more discussion about it actually. Um, Trish, if you've noticed, we have a lot of EdTech workshops before before the start of the school year, and we have a few discussions about the non-academic side of online learning. So I love that you pointed that out. Um, Trish, I want to dig deeper into the non-academic side. Can you share to us, you know, the different programs? You don't have to really go deep, but you know, just give us a perspective on how you have further, you know, developed the idea of empathy among your teachers, students, or every member of your school community, and what you've done to exercise more patience and compassion. Maybe just a short sharing.
Yeah, sure. I think other than the constant reminders that we would give our teachers about being compassionate, it's something that it always comes up during meetings. And I always tell the associate principals to remind also their teachers often about being compassionate and considerate about deadlines and all these things. Other than these things, we also have partnered, of course, with our Office of Guidance and Counseling Every week, they have a learning session scheduled and something that supports their students' growth mindset. Something also very important with for our students to also grow into. And they also have sessions on mental health and addressing anxiety and addressing stress. So I think right now schools have to really beef up their guidance and counseling office and their programs with regard to mental health, because this is something that all schools must provide for our students.
I love that the way we see EdTech right now. If you've noticed, when we're talking about online learning, the holistic side of it, we're not anymore talking about EdTech because we know for sure that the tool there is, it could be an online video conference or whatever, and we are providing that to support our students. Like I know for a fact, I think one rule I think that has been in place in our school, for example, is the online Zoom. It's like there's an online guidance counseling room
Yeah, that's
that
good.
students can just go in. It's like in school, like
Right.
uh, the counselor's room is just there. It's open for anyone to go in, and I
Mhm.
love that has been pushed further. The idea that you can still talk to anyone, to talk
Mhm.
to your teacher or counselor, and share whatever experiences you have right now. Thank
Yeah,
you for
Jim,
that,
if I
Trish.
may
Yeah.
add also, actually, right now we're also trying to extend the homeroom period because we also value the role of the advisors and also giving that moral and emotional support for the students. So I think this whole program of online distance learning is still alive. I mean, we adjust it as needed. So one adjustment that I have proposed also to the team is to give more time for homeroom, and that's, I think the students would probably appreciate that as well.
Yeah, morning messages has been, I don't know, we did expect that, but kids really appreciate it, and
Yeah.
even parents, especially for the younger ones, because like what you've said, there are the learning aides. We call them as learning supervisors or, help at home. They also appreciate it, like the morning messages, especially for the younger students. So it's a lovely part. I think it's a lovely development in terms of online distance learning.
Mm-hmm.
We're now on the last stretch of our podcast interview with Trish, and this is something that would require reflection and everything. And I'm very confident to listen to Trish's idea. At this time around, we mentioned about equity, the idea that tech might have actually widened the gap. So the question to that is EdTech really helping education move forward, or is it widening the gap? So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Trish.
Yeah, I think EdTech really is definitely pushing everyone forward in terms of the education field. Seriously working on the much clamored 21st century skills. Diba? It's already 2020, and then some schools are still not into the 21st century skills. And the 21st century might end without us really focusing on building the 21st century skills. And it took a pandemic to be able to do that. If there's anything good that came out of this pandemic, with regard to education, it's probably this, no? And the issue of equity uh, in accessibility of technology is largely really a concern of the government also, especially for the ones who cannot afford technology, the ones who are below the poverty line. Many students, many public school students, I have gone to a public school and I saw them in during recess or lunch break, and I saw everyone, all the students in the public school, all on their mobile phones. So I think if the teachers already start also allowing the students to use and capitalize on the mobile phones that the students have, I think this is already a good start for EdTech in these small schools. And for the rest of those who cannot afford, the government really has to step in, because EdTech, like what I said, EdTech is here to stay, and we cannot anymore ignore the value of technology in teaching and learning, right? And I think what's crucial here to narrow that gap uh, in students in using technology is teachers have to be better designers of lessons. They have to start designing lessons the thinking about what the students have in their hands. So knowing that if the students have mobile phones, they can design a lesson and an assessment that can make use of the mobile phones of the students, right? And this is something that we can already start seeing post-pandemic in a public school setting. So this can be done. And this is not impossible, definitely not impossible, because I think this is already the direction of education in the next few years, no? If not years, maybe next year immediately, right? Everybody will start investing also in the technology. It doesn't have to be the most expensive iPad. It can be a simple tablet. It can be a simple mobile phone that can just connect to the internet. So that's one thing also that the government will also have to work on, is that accessibility to the internet. I don't know if in the UN this is already considered a basic need. It should be already a basic
It
need.
is. It
Internet
is.
access, is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
It has been listed as
Great, great,
yeah.
great. So
Basic.
everyone in all the members of the United Nations should also already work on this. And we already know the value also of being connected globally to all information, to all people of all nations as well. And this is going to be, you can just imagine how rich our education would be if everyone has access to the internet, and every student also has access to technology. I can only, my heart is like leaping for with joy at this thought. No, so this is a dream, and it's not an impossible dream. So if there's any one thing that I would like to end this discussion with, is that EdTech is here to stay, and EdTech for all is not impossible. Yeah.
Chris, I love your very hopeful remark, closing remark for this. And I love that. I know we're not denying the gap. It's there. It's actually
Yes.
the reality. It's actually the challenge. And we have seen that. We have seen that more than ever right now. But I also love that you highlighted what needs to be done, and the government should step in. Schools cannot do it. I mean, some private schools can do it. Not even all private schools. The smaller ones can actually bring
Some
uh,
have closed, right?
full edtech in their school and in their school. So the pandemic has shown us how different local government could also be very proactive, and stepping in actually provided much needed support. Our favorite Pasig City, even at the beginning, they were already on top of in terms of helping the local Department of Education. On the national level, we see different efforts, um, but we are still hopeful that we can still further improve. Budget constraint and all those kinds of things are top issues right now, and the public school system depend on the national government on this. But we are very hopeful that hopefully, well, that's too hope already in one word, in one sentence. But like what you've said, we need to realize that edtech is really here to stay. The rate of adoption could be very, very different, but even the rate of adoption actually affects our idea of accessibility. There will still be some schools who will be ahead,
Yeah.
but our main idea is, we bring everyone together. We move education forward on different rates, but at the same time, we need to move everyone into that future that we're looking into. So thank you so much, Trish.
Thank you.
I love the discussion. It's been very, very anchored on your experience, but at the same time hitting some goals that we have in the future. So final words, Trish. Anything that you would like to share to our audience?
I think I'd really just also want to emphasize empathy, because in the design learning process, or design thinking process, the first step really is exercising empathy. So if we want to design a good program for our students and design a good education also for our students, we really have to start with empathy. That's it.
Wonderful ending, Trish. So thank you so much again to our audience for being here, watching and listening to our episode right now. And more importantly, thank you so much, Trish, for being with us. We appreciate your presence, and we love the sharing, the ideas, the expertise that you've shared with us. So to everyone, goodbye, thank you, and we'll catch you later in our next episode. Bye, Trish. Bye,
Bye, and
everyone.
thanks, Jim, for inviting me. Stay safe, everyone.